The email arrived at 6 a.m., a digital slap that stung worse than any physical blow. "Dad, here's what you owe for my wedding. Be grateful I'm letting you help." Attached was an itemized bill for $40,000. Venue, catering, designer dress, honeymoon in Bali. All on my tab. And at the bottom of the spreadsheet, in the notes section, "No need to attend. Your contribution is enough." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at my laptop screen, the blue light harsh in my darkened kitchen. The coffee I just poured sat untouched, steam rising and dissipating, like the relationship I thought I had with my daughter. My name was Robert Keller, and apparently, I was good enough to fund Rebecca's perfect wedding, but not good enough to watch her walk down the aisle. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of my modest home in Mapleton, the same home where I'd raised Rebecca alone after her mother walked out when she was just 7. The same home where I'd bandaged skinned knees, helped with science projects, and stayed up countless nights worrying when she missed curfew. The same home I'd nearly lost paying for her college education. I scrolled through the detailed spreadsheet again, my jaw clenching tighter with each line item. Premium venue at Lakeside Gardens, $15,000. Gourmet catering, $12,000. Designer wedding dress, $5,000. Bali honeymoon, $8,000. No expense spared, except the expense of my dignity. It wasn't always like this. For years after her mother left, Rebecca and I were inseparable. I became both mother and father overnight, learning to braid hair, shop for training bras, and navigate the minefield of teenage girl emotions. I worked double shifts at the manufacturing plant to ensure she never felt the financial strain. When she got into Berkeley, I sold my restored '67 Mustang, my one indulgence, to help with tuition. Then she met Dominic Whitley, heir to a real estate development fortune, with the kind of polished charm that comes from generations of privilege. Within months, my down-to-earth daughter was transformed. Suddenly, our Friday night pizza tradition was too carb-heavy. My Christmas gifts were thoughtful but not quite right. My advice was outdated, and my blue-collar background became something to overcome rather than the foundation that had supported her. The wedding planning began 6 months ago. At first, I was included, nominally. Rebecca would call with updates about venues she was considering or ask my opinion on dates, though it became clear my input wasn't actually wanted. Then the calls became less frequent. My texts went unanswered for days. When I finally reached her 3 weeks ago, she was flustered, dismissive. "Dad, honestly, Dominic's family has connections with all the best vendors. His mother knows exactly what's appropriate. It's probably best if you just let us handle it." I'd swallowed my pride then, but this itemized bill delivered like I was a vendor rather than her father was beyond anything I could have imagined. My finger hovered over the reply button. What could I even say? That I'd emptied my savings for her college? That I'd worked overtime for 15 years to give her everything? That I'd sacrificed any semblance of a personal life to be there for her? None of it would matter. The spreadsheet made that clear. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping against the kitchen window in a gentle rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. The smell of spring soil and wet pavement drifted in. Smells that reminded me of teaching Rebecca to ride her bike in the driveway, holding the seat until she found her balance, letting go only when I knew she was ready. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I closed the laptop and walked to the living room, where photos of Rebecca lined the mantel. Her kindergarten graduation with a gap-toothed smile. Middle school soccer team, mud-splattered but triumphant. High school prom, where I'd embarrassed her by insisting on taking too many pictures. College graduation, her arms around my neck, whispering, "We did it, Dad." Had I raised her to be this person? Had I missed some crucial lesson about gratitude or respect? Or was this the influence of Dominic and his family, with their casual disdain for people who worked with their hands? The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. My brother Michael's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Didn't trust myself to speak without my voice breaking. But Michael had always been my sounding board, the voice of reason when mine faltered. "Hey, Rob, just checking in about the wedding. You got your tux rental sorted? I laughed, a hollow sound that caught in my throat. Apparently I don't need one. What are you talking about? I just got an email from Rebecca. A bill for 40 grand and instructions not to attend the wedding. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Michael? You there? I'm here. Just processing. That can't be right, Rob. There must be some mistake. The only mistake was thinking my daughter still saw me as her father and not an ATM. I forwarded him the email as we spoke, heard the ping on his end, then the heavy sigh as he read it. Jesus Christ, he muttered. This isn't Rebecca. This isn't the kid who made us watch Field of Dreams every Father's Day because it was the only movie that made you cry. People change, I said, surprised by the flatness in my voice. Not this much, not without reason. What about Dominic? Could he be behind this? I considered it. Dominic had always been cordial to my face, if a bit condescending. The type who called me sir, while subtly adjusting his posture to emphasize our height difference, who complimented my quaint home with the same tone one might use for a child's crayon drawing. Maybe. Or his parents. They're the type who think net worth and human worth are the same thing. Michael was quiet for a moment. So what are you gonna do? It was the question I'd been avoiding since opening the email. What would I do? Empty my retirement account to pay for a wedding I wasn't welcome to attend? Refuse and risk whatever relationship remained with my only child? Neither option seemed bearable. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell her to go to hell. Another part is ready to drain my 401k if it means not losing her completely. Don't do anything yet, Michael advised. Give yourself time to think. This isn't something you need to decide today. But I knew myself well enough to recognize the slow burn of anger building beneath my hurt. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about recognition of the life I'd built for us, about acknowledgement of my place in her world. After hanging up with Michael, I poured my now cold coffee down the drain and walked out to the garage, my sanctuary. The place where I'd taught Rebecca to change a tire, build a birdhouse, fix a leaky faucet, skills her new family would probably dismiss as irrelevant in their world of maintenance staff and service calls. The workbench stood solid and familiar, tools arranged in the same order they'd been for 20 years. I ran my fingers over the hammer I'd used to hang her growth chart on the kitchen doorframe, the screwdriver that had assembled countless Christmas toys, the wrench that had fixed her first car, a sensible used Honda that she'd been mortified to drive to college. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about attending or not attending. This wasn't even about paying or not paying. This was about being erased. My contribution to her life reduced to a dollar amount. My presence deemed unnecessary. My years of sacrifice calculated and found wanting. I picked up my phone and called Sarah Jensen, an old friend who worked at the local newspaper. We dated briefly after Rebecca left for college but remained close even after realizing we worked better as friends. Rob, everything okay? You never call during work hours. I need a favor, Sarah. A big one. Name it. How much would a full-page ad in the Sunday paper cost? There was a pause. Around $3,000, depending on placement. Why? What are you thinking? I told her my plan. It was petty, it was public, it was probably going to burn whatever bridge remained between Rebecca and me. But it was honest in a way the pristine wedding she was planning would never be. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked when I finished. This isn't something you can take back. I'm sure, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to speak louder than the people trying to silence you. After hanging up, I sat down at my laptop and began to write. Not an angry screed or a bitter denunciation, but a letter to the daughter I'd raised, a reminder of where she came from and who had stood beside her all along. Every word carefully chosen, every memory precisely recalled. By the time I finished, the sky outside had darkened and my anger had crystallized into something harder, more focused. I reread what I'd written, made a few edits, and sent it to Sarah with the subject line, "For Sunday's paper." Then I emailed Rebecca's wedding planner, a woman named Veronica, whose contact information was included in the spreadsheet. Ms. Harrington, I understand you're handling my daughter's wedding. I wanted to inform you that I will not be contributing the requested $40,000. However, I will be making my presence known in another way. Please convey to Rebecca and the Whitleys that sometimes the most valuable gifts can't be quantified on a spreadsheet. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before pressing down. There would be fallout. There would be anger. There would likely be tears and recriminations and damage that might never be repaired. But there would also be truth, my truth, laid bare for all to see. The following morning, another email from Rebecca arrived, this one with several missed calls from her and Dominic. Dad, please call me immediately. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop. This isn't funny. So they'd heard from Veronica. Good, let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety I'd felt staring at that spreadsheet, seeing myself reduced to a financial obligation rather than a father. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the bank and withdrew $3,000 in cash, the cost of the full-page ad. It was a significant amount, especially with retirement looming, but some statements were worth the price. At the newspaper office, Sarah met me with concern in her eyes. Last chance to reconsider, Rob. Once this goes to print on Sunday, I handed her the envelope of cash. Some lessons are worth $40,000. This one's a bargain at $3,000. She nodded slowly. I'll need you to sign this release form. And Rob? For what it's worth, I think she's going to regret this far more than you ever will. As I signed the form, my phone buzzed with another text from Rebecca. Dad, please call me. Whatever you're planning, we can talk about this. 3 days too late for talking, I thought, pocketing the phone without responding. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Dominic's father, Edward Whitley. Mr. Keller, he began, his voice smooth as polished marble. I understand there's been some confusion regarding Rebecca's wedding. No confusion at all, I replied. The spreadsheet was very detailed. He cleared his throat. Yes, well, perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Rebecca never intended for you to feel excluded. Quite the contrary. Is that why the note specifically said I didn't need to attend? A pause. I'm not aware of any such note. But regardless, we'd like to clear this up. The Whitleys have always prided ourselves on family values. We certainly wouldn't want Rebecca's father to feel unwelcome. The practiced sincerity in his voice made my skin crawl. This wasn't about me or Rebecca. This was about appearances, about the narrative they wanted to present to their social circle. Mr. Whitley, I've been a father for 26 years. I know when I'm being managed rather than respected. That's not. Tell Rebecca I received her message loud and clear, and now she'll receive mine. Good day, Mr. Whitley. I hung up, a strange calm settling over me. For years, I'd bent over backward to give Rebecca everything, to compensate for her mother's absence, to prove that one parent could be enough. I'd silenced my own needs, deferred my own dreams, restructured my entire life around ensuring she never felt lacking. But in doing so, had I taught her that I existed only to serve her needs? Had my sacrifices become so expected that they were no longer seen as gifts but as obligations? As Sunday approached, the calls and texts increased in frequency and urgency. Rebecca, Dominic, Edward and Elaine Whitley, even Veronica, the wedding planner. I let them all go to voicemail, listened to the increasingly desperate messages, and felt nothing but certainty that I was, finally, doing the right thing. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of perfect clarity that follows a storm. I rose early, made coffee, and waited for the paper to arrive. At 6:30 a.m., I heard the soft thud of the newspaper hitting my front porch. I opened the door, picked it up, and there it was, a full-page advertisement on page 3, exactly as I'd requested. At the top, in bold letters, a father's wedding gift to his daughter. Below, the letter I'd written, accompanied by photos from throughout Rebecca's life. Rebecca at 5, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. At 10, proudly displaying the birdhouse we'd built together. At 16, behind the wheel of her first car, my hand giving her a thumbs up from the passenger seat. At 22, her college graduation, both of us beaming. And then the text. Dear Rebecca, when you were 7, you asked why the moon followed our car at night. I told you it wasn't following the car. It was following you because you were its favorite person. You believed me completely. When you were 12 and didn't make the volleyball team, you cried in your room for hours. I sat outside your door the entire time, waiting for you to be ready to talk. When you finally emerged, we made ice cream sundaes and planned your next adventure. When you were 16 and crashed your first car into a mailbox, you called me terrified. I arrived in minutes, handled the property owner, and never once raised my voice, even though that repair took 3 months of overtime to pay off. When you were 18 and received your Berkeley acceptance letter, you ran through the house screaming with joy. I waited until you went to bed to calculate how I would afford it, then sold my prized Mustang the next day without hesitation. These are the moments that built us, the invisible threads that connect father to daughter. They cannot be itemized on a spreadsheet. They cannot be paid for with a check. They simply exist, a foundation laid one sacrifice at a time. You've asked me for $40,000 for your wedding, while informing me my presence isn't required. Here is my response. I will not be paying for a celebration I'm not welcome to attend, but I am giving you something far more valuable: the truth. The truth is that no amount of money will buy you the happiness you're seeking. No perfect venue or designer dress will fill the space where authenticity should live. No carefully curated guest list will replace the warmth of genuine connection. My gift to you is this reminder. You come from a man who works with his hands, who honors his commitments, who shows up. A man who has never once placed conditions on his love for you. A man who would have worn a rented tux and danced with his daughter at her wedding with more pride than any father has ever felt had he been invited. Whatever path you choose from here, know this: my door remains open. Not because I am perfect, not because I haven't made mistakes, but because love, real love, doesn't come with invoices attached. With eternal love, your father, Robert Keller. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I waited for the storm I knew was coming. It arrived at precisely 7:22 a.m. in the form of screeching tires in my driveway, car doors slamming, footsteps pounding up my front walk, and then the doorbell, ringing continuously as if the person on the other side believed volume equated to urgency. I opened the door to find Rebecca, still in pajama pants and a Berkeley sweatshirt, her face flushed with what might have been anger or embarrassment, or both. Behind her stood Dominic, looking uncomfortable in designer loafers that were never meant to touch suburban concrete. "How could you?" Rebecca demanded, pushing past me into the house. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I closed the door calmly, excluding Dominic, who remained awkwardly on the porch. "I responded to your email with the same level of public consideration you showed me." "That email wasn't from me!" she shouted, her voice breaking. "I never sent you any spreadsheet or told you not to come to my wedding. How could you think I would do that?" I stared at her, trying to process her words. "What are you talking about?" "I have the email right here." I reached for my laptop, opened it, and pulled up the message. Rebecca looked at the screen, her face draining of color. "That's my email address, but I didn't send this." "I swear to God, Dad." "Then who did?" But even as I asked, I knew. The perfectly formatted spreadsheet, the calculated costs, the clinical tone. It all made sense now. Rebecca must have realized it at the same moment. "Elaine," she whispered, referring to Dominic's mother. "She's been handling the correspondence with vendors. She has access to my email for wedding purposes." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Elaine Whitley, who had made it clear from the beginning that she found me charmingly provincial at best and embarrassingly blue-collar at worst. Who had questioned whether the father-daughter dance was really necessary at the wedding planning meeting I'd attended. Who had suggested that perhaps Rebecca might want to be walked down the aisle by both her father and someone from Dominic's family for balance. "She wouldn't," Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Wouldn't she?" I countered. "She's been trying to minimize my role from day one." Rebecca sank onto the couch, the newspaper clutched in her hand. "But why would she?" How could she think I wouldn't find out? Because she assumed I'd either pay quietly to avoid embarrassing you or refuse and look like the villain. Either way, she wins. I'm either absent or painted as difficult. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I would never... You know that, right? You have to know that. Did I? The truth was, Rebecca had changed since meeting Dominic. She'd adopted his family's tastes, their mannerisms, their worldview. Was it so hard to believe she might have adopted their dismissive attitude toward me as well? But looking at her now, wearing the sweatshirt I'd bought her on campus move-in day, her hair unbrushed, tears streaming down her face, I saw my daughter again. Not the polished woman who sometimes seemed like a stranger, but the girl who had once believed the moon followed her because she was special. I want to believe you, I said finally. But these past few months, Bex, it's like you've been slipping away from me. Like you're embarrassed by where you came from. She shook her head vehemently. No, never. I've been stressed and caught up in all this wedding insanity. But I would never send you a bill instead of an invitation. You're walking me down the aisle. You're dancing with me. You're giving a toast. It's all planned. The doorbell rang again, insistently. Dominic was still waiting outside. Rebecca glanced toward the door, but made no move to answer it. What do we do now? She asked quietly. Half the town has probably seen that ad by now. I looked at the newspaper, at the photos I'd chosen so carefully, at the words I'd written in anger but also in love. Now, I said, we tell the truth, all of it, including what your future mother-in-law tried to do. Rebecca's expression hardened with a resolve I recognized. It was the same look she'd worn when standing up to bullies in middle school, when fighting for academic accommodations in college, when defending her thesis against skeptical professors. Yes, she said, we do, and Dominic needs to hear it directly from me. She stood, straightened her shoulders and walked to the door. I heard it open, heard her say, we need to talk about your mother. Heard the sharp intake of breath from Dominic. As their voices faded toward the driveway, I looked around my modest living room, at the worn furniture that had hosted countless movie nights, at the scratched coffee table where we'd assembled jigsaw puzzles, at the walls that had absorbed both laughter and tears over 26 years of single fatherhood. This house might not impress the Whitleys. My job might not command their respect. My bank account might not match their expectations, but I had given my daughter something their money could never buy, a foundation of unconditional love, of showing up day after day, of putting her needs before my own not because it was expected, but because that's what love does. And now, it seemed, that foundation was strong enough to withstand even this storm. Outside, car doors slammed again. Engines started. Tires crunched on gravel as two separate vehicles pulled away, Rebecca and Dominic apparently heading in different directions. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text. Going to confront Elaine, then picking up breakfast. We have a lot to talk about. I love you, Dad. More than you know. I set the phone down, a weight lifting from my chest for the first time in months. Whatever happened next, whether the wedding proceeded as planned, was postponed, or canceled entirely, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I hadn't lost my daughter after all. And that realization was worth far more than $40,000. I arrived at the newspaper office early Monday morning, heart in my throat. The Sunday paper had circulated throughout our small town of Mapleton with my full-page declaration. Now it was time to face the consequences. Sarah met me at the reception desk, her expression unreadable. "You've caused quite a stir," she said, leading me to her office. "Our phones haven't stopped ringing since yesterday." I sank into the chair across from her desk. "All negative, I assume." "Actually, no." She slid a stack of printouts toward me. "These are emails and messages we've received. People are overwhelmingly on your side." I flipped through the pages, scanning the comments. Brave man. About time someone stood up to those Whitley snobs. Best father of the bride speech I've ever read. There were dozens of them. You've struck a nerve, Sarah said. Turns out a lot of people in town have felt steamrolled by the Whitley family at some point. I set the papers down, conflicted. Public validation wasn't what I'd been seeking. This wasn't about me versus the Whitleys. It was about reconnecting with my daughter. Any word from Rebecca? Sarah asked gently. She confronted Elaine yesterday. Haven't heard the fallout yet. I checked my phone again. No new messages since Rebecca's text saying she was heading to the Whitley estate. Well, I have some news that might interest you. Sarah tapped at her keyboard, turning the monitor toward me. Edward Whitley called an emergency board meeting at First National this morning. Edward was chairman of Mapleton's only bank, a position he never tired of mentioning at community events. Why should I care about that? Because 20 minutes ago, they announced a $50,000 donation to the community college's trade school program, specifically earmarked for scholarships for blue-collar workers seeking advancement. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Sound like damage control to you? I laughed despite myself. Subtle as a sledgehammer. The Whitleys care about one thing above all else, their reputation. Your ad threatened that. Now they're scrambling. My phone buzzed. Rebecca, can you meet me at Lakeside Gardens, 1 p.m.? Bring your suit measurements. I showed Sarah the message. Lakeside Gardens? The wedding venue? She smiled. Looks like you might be getting that father-daughter dance after all. Or walking into another ambush, I said, though I didn't really believe it. The Rebecca who had shown up at my door in pajamas and tears wasn't the same woman who'd been gradually distancing herself over the past 6 months. That Rebecca, my Rebecca, wouldn't set me up for public humiliation. Only one way to find out, Sarah said. For what it's worth, I think this story might have a happier ending than you expected. I arrived at Lakeside Gardens at 12:45, parking my weathered pickup truck between a Mercedes SUV and a BMW sedan. The contrast wasn't lost on me, a visual representation of the divide I'd been trying to bridge. The venue was spectacular, I had to admit. A glass-walled building overlooking the town's namesake lake, surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens. Inside, the vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows created a cathedral-like atmosphere. It was beautiful, elegant, and intimidating, much like the world Rebecca seemed determined to enter. Dad! Rebecca's voice echoed across the empty reception hall. She crossed the polished floor quickly, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, a stark contrast to the formal surroundings. You're early, she said, hugging me tightly. Some habits die hard. I'd been pathologically punctual since my days at the manufacturing plant, where tardiness meant docked pay. She led me to a small table set for two, overlooking the lake. A bottle of wine was already open, breathing. Before anyone else arrives, I need you to know everything, she said, pouring 2 glasses. Yesterday was illuminating. I imagine Elaine wasn't pleased to see you, I said, accepting the wine. Rebecca laughed without humor. That's putting it mildly. She took a deep breath. When I showed up demanding answers, she tried to deny it at first. Then she tried to justify it. Said she was protecting the integrity of the celebration by ensuring you'd contribute appropriately without disrupting the aesthetic. I winced at the phrasing. Charming. She actually said, and I'm quoting here, some parents simply don't understand their proper role in modern weddings. Rebecca's knuckles whitened around her wine glass. Apparently my proper role was to smile and nod while she systematically erased half my identity. And Dominic? Where was he during all this? Her expression softened slightly. He arrived halfway through the confrontation. I've never seen him that angry. Not at me, at his mother. He told her she had 2 choices. Apologize sincerely and step back from all wedding planning, or we'd elope and they'd never see their grandchildren. I nearly choked on my wine. Grandchildren? Is there something else you need to tell me? No, God, no, she blushed. He was making a point. And it worked. Edward and Elaine are on their way here now, to apologize to you in person. I set my glass down carefully. I don't need their apology, Bex. I just need to know that you and I are okay. We're more than okay. She reached across the table, taking my hand. But I need you to hear them out, not for their sake, but for mine. And, she hesitated, for Dominic's. He's caught in the middle of this, Dad. He loves me, and he respects you more than you know. I thought about Dominic standing awkwardly on my porch the previous morning, clearly uncomfortable but present nonetheless. Maybe I'd been too quick to lump him in with his parents. All right, I conceded. I'll listen, but I won't pretend this didn't happen. I wouldn't want you to. Her smile turned mischievous. Actually, I had the newspaper ad framed. I'm thinking of hanging it in our first home together, a reminder of where I come from and what really matters. The sound of doors opening interrupted us. Dominic entered first, followed by his parents. Edward Whitley looked as polished as ever in a tailored suit, but his usual confidence seemed dimmed. Elaine walked slightly behind him, her perfect posture and immaculate appearance at odds with the discomfort evident in her eyes. Mr. Keller, Edward began, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I stood but didn't take his hand immediately. I'm here because Rebecca asked me to be. He lowered his hand, nodding as if he'd expected this response. Understandable. That is, Elaine and I, owe you a sincere apology. Elaine stepped forward. Up close, I could see she'd been crying. Her expertly applied makeup couldn't quite hide the redness around her eyes. What I did was inexcusable, she said, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. I convinced myself I was acting in Rebecca and Dominic's best interests, but the truth is, I was protecting my own vision, my own ego. I was wrong, terribly wrong, and I've hurt everyone involved. Including your son, I pointed out. Especially my son, she agreed, glancing at Dominic, who stood with his arm around Rebecca. And the daughter-in-law I hope to have. I've jeopardized relationships that should have been nurtured. I studied her face, looking for signs of the calculation I'd come to expect. Instead, I saw something I recognized from my own mirror, the look of a parent who's realized they've failed their child. The truth is, Edward interjected, we've become so accustomed to managing perceptions that we forgot about the reality underneath. Your letter in the paper was illuminating. It wasn't meant for you, I said. It was meant for Rebecca. Nevertheless, it affected us deeply. Edward gestured to the chairs. May we sit? There's something we'd like to propose. I looked to Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. We all sat, an uneasy circle of people with nothing in common except the two young adults watching us with hopeful expressions. We'd like to start over, Edward said. Not just with the wedding planning, but with our relationship as future in-laws. Rebecca has made it clear that you are non-negotiable in her life, Mr. Keller. And we want to be part of her life, which means finding a way to be part of yours as well. We come from different worlds, I said bluntly. That's not going to change because of one meeting. No, Elaine agreed, but our attitude toward those differences can change. Should change. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. This isn't a peace offering. It's a rectification. Inside was a check for $40,000, the exact amount from the fraudulent invoice made out to me. We don't expect this to undo the hurt we've caused. Edward explained, but the wedding expenses should never have been your burden, especially not under such false pretenses. I pushed the check back toward them. I don't want your money. Dad, Rebecca said quietly, please hear them out completely. Elaine took a deep breath. We're not asking you to accept this for yourself. We're asking you to accept it for Rebecca, as a fund for the two of you to redesign the wedding together. Every decision, from the venue to the menu, reconsidered with your input. A true reflection of who she is and where she comes from. I looked at Rebecca, surprised. You'd be willing to start over? With only 2 months to go? In a heartbeat, she said firmly. This was never the wedding I wanted. It was the wedding I thought I should want. I've been so caught up trying to fit into Dominic's world that I lost sight of my own. Dominic stepped forward, pulling up a chair beside Rebecca. Mr. Keller, I owe you an apology too. I should have noticed what was happening. I should have protected Rebecca from feeling she needed to change for my family. There was an earnestness in his voice that caught me off guard. This wasn't the polished, slightly condescending young man I'd come to know. This was someone fighting for something he valued. I love your daughter exactly as she is, he continued, including the parts that come from you. Especially those parts, actually. Her work ethic, her practicality, her ability to fix anything from a leaky faucet to a broken heart. Those aren't qualities she needs to hide. They're the reason I fell in love with her. Rebecca beamed at him, then turned to me. So what do you say, Dad? Will you help me plan a wedding that honors both halves of my life? Not just who I'm becoming, but who I've always been. I looked around the table, at the hopeful faces of the young couple, at the chastened expressions of the Whitleys, at the elegant venue that suddenly seemed less intimidating and more full of possibility. On one condition, I said finally. Name it, Rebecca replied immediately. I'm still selling that full-page ad in next Sunday's paper. I allowed myself a small smile, but this time, it'll be a proper wedding announcement, one that mentions the bride's father is walking her down the aisle, giving her away, and yes, enjoying that father-daughter dance. The tension broke. Rebecca laughed, Dominic looked relieved, and even Edward cracked a genuine smile. Only Elaine seemed hesitant. There's one more thing, she said carefully. Rebecca mentioned you sold a classic Mustang to help pay for her college education. We, that is, Edward and I, we tracked it down. My heart stopped. The '67 Mustang had been my pride and joy, a restoration project I'd worked on for years, only to sell it without hesitation when Rebecca's education required it. It's being delivered here today, Edward said. Consider it not a gift from us, but a return of something that should never have been taken from you. Something we hope you'll drive to the wedding. As if on cue, the rumble of a familiar engine echoed outside. Rebecca grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the window. There, in the parking lot, gleaming in the afternoon sun, was my Mustang. The candy apple red paint job I'd painstakingly applied myself. The chrome details I'd polished by hand countless nights in the garage. How did you... I couldn't finish the sentence. Turns out the classic car community is pretty tight-knit, Dominic explained. The current owner was reluctant until I explained the situation. Then he insisted on selling it back at the original price you received. I turned to face them, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me plan this wedding, Rebecca urged. Say you'll walk me down the aisle in 2 months. Say you'll dance with me to that Bruce Springsteen song you always played when I was little. Thunder Road, I said softly, remembering how I'd dance around the living room with her standing on my feet. The very one, she squeezed my hand. And say you'll get to know Dominic's parents for who they are, not who they pretended to be. They made a terrible mistake, but they're trying to make it right. I looked at Edward and Elaine Whitley. Really looked at them, perhaps for the first time. Behind the polished veneer and social positioning, I saw two people who, like me, loved their child fiercely. People who had made mistakes in that love, as all parents do. People who were now offering not just apologies but actions to back those words. All right, I said finally. We start fresh. All of us. The relief in the room was palpable. Rebecca hugged me tightly. Then Dominic extended his hand, not with the condescending sir of before, but with genuine respect. Thank you, he said simply, for raising the woman I love and for giving us this second chance. As we all moved outside to see the Mustang up close, Rebecca pulled me aside, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You know what this means, right? You'll need to teach me to drive stick shift before the honeymoon. The honeymoon? I raised an eyebrow. She grinned. We're thinking of road tripping down the Pacific Coast Highway instead of Bali. Dominic's never seen the redwoods, can you believe it? Some experiences you can't buy with a platinum card. I watched as Dominic circled the Mustang admiringly, asking Edward to take a photo of him beside it. Perhaps there was hope for the boy after all. One more thing, Rebecca said, her voice softer now. That line in your letter about the moon following our car because I was its favorite person, I never forgot that. Even during college, on nights when I felt alone or overwhelmed, I'd look up at the moon and remember I was someone's favorite person in the whole world. That gave me strength when nothing else did. My throat tightened. You've always been my favorite person, Bex. Nothing could ever change that. I know, she said, wiping away a tear. Quote, I just lost sight of it for a while. But I'm back now. We're back. As we rejoined the group, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore, or even about my relationship with Rebecca. It was about what happens when people choose truth over appearances, reconciliation over pride, love over ego. The Whitleys would never be like me. Their world of country clubs and board meetings would always be foreign to my world of workshop dust and calloused hands. But perhaps we didn't need to be alike to respect each other, to find common ground in our love for these two young people. 2 months later, I stood at the back of the redesigned wedding space, no longer in the formal reception hall, but on the lakeside lawn where Rebecca and I had once fed ducks on Sunday afternoons. The guests were seated not according to social standing, but in a circle surrounding the couple, symbolizing the community that would support their marriage. My brother Michael adjusted my tie, not rented, but purchased, a gift from Rebecca, who insisted her father shouldn't borrow clothes for her wedding. "Ready for this?" he asked. I nodded, watching as guests continued to arrive, an eclectic mix of Whitley family friends and designer labels and my buddies from the plant in their Sunday best. They mingled awkwardly at first, then with increasing warmth, as the barriers of class and background gradually dissolved in the shared joy of the occasion. Edward approached, extending a glass of whiskey. Tradition says the fathers of the bride and groom should share a drink before the ceremony. I accepted the glass, clinking it against his. To traditions worth keeping. And to new ones worth building, he added. We drank in companionable silence, watching as Elaine fussed over the flower arrangements one last time before taking her seat. She caught my eye and offered a genuine smile, one I returned without hesitation. The music began, not the classical quartet originally planned, but a local jazz trio Rebecca and I had discovered at a downtown cafe years ago. And there she was, appearing at the top of the stone pathway in a dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and practical. Silk and lace for the Whitley sensibilities, with pockets and comfortable shoes for the practical girl I'd raised. As I moved to meet her, to take her arm and walk her toward the man she loved, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was not the wedding I would have chosen, nor was it the one the Whitleys would have designed. It was better. A true reflection of Rebecca herself, embracing both worlds without apology. You look beautiful, I whispered as I reached her. So do you, she replied, straightening my tie. That Mustang cleanup suits you. We began our walk, but halfway down the aisle, Rebecca paused, turning to address the gathered guests. Before we continue, I want to thank you all for being here, especially after the rather public drama that preceded this day. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. What you're witnessing isn't just two families joining together. It's a testament to what happens when we choose authenticity over expectation, forgiveness over resentment, and love, real love, over everything else. She squeezed my arm, and we continued our journey toward Dominic, who waited with undisguised adoration. As I placed Rebecca's hand in his, I felt not loss, but expansion. My family growing, my heart making room for new connections, new understandings, new love. Hours later, as the reception reached its peak, the jazz trio transitioned to a familiar piano intro. The opening notes of Thunder Road filled the air, and Rebecca appeared at my side, hand extended. I believe you promised me a dance, Dad. As we moved across the floor, her dress swishing around our feet, I remembered all the times we danced in our living room, her tiny feet balanced on mine, her laughter filling our modest home with more joy than any mansion could contain. You know, she said, leaning her head against my shoulder, that newspaper ad was the best thing that could have happened to us. It forced everyone to stop pretending. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken loudly, I agreed. Or printed in 24-point font across a full page. She laughed. As the song reached its chorus, I caught sight of Dominic dancing with his mother, their previous tension replaced by genuine affection. Edward stood nearby, deep in conversation with my brother about classic cars, their different backgrounds momentarily forgotten in shared enthusiasm. Look at them, Rebecca marveled. Who would have thought? People can surprise you, I said. Sometimes even in good ways. As Bruce Springsteen sang about roads unwinding and the night's promise, I held my daughter close, savoring this moment that had almost been stolen from us. The journey here hadn't been smooth. It had been messy, painful, and raw. But standing here now, watching our two families tentatively becoming one, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Because sometimes, it takes a storm to clear the air. Sometimes, it takes $40,000 worth of honesty to reveal what's truly priceless. And sometimes, it takes nearly losing something to remember why you treasured it in the first place. I love you, Dad, Rebecca whispered as the song drew to a close. Thanks for never giving up on me, even when I made it difficult. That's the thing about being a father, I replied, kissing her forehead gently. It's not a role you can invoice for or bill by the hour. It's forever, no matter what. And in that moment, as the last notes faded and applause filled the air, I knew that was the only truth that had ever really mattered. 5 years after the wedding that almost tore us apart, I stood in my garage putting the finishing touches on a handcrafted oak rocking chair. The smooth curves of the armrests reflected months of careful sanding, the joints fitted with the precision that comes from decades of woodworking. This wasn't just any chair. It was a gift for Rebecca and Dominic's first child, my granddaughter Emma, due in less than a month. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching dust motes swirling in the air and highlighting the grain of the wood beneath my calloused hands. I ran my fingers over the engraving on the headrest, Emma Rose Whitley Keller, with a small crescent moon carved beside her name, our little family symbol. The rumble of an approaching car broke my concentration. Through the open garage door, I watched my restored Mustang pull into the driveway, Rebecca at the wheel. Her pregnancy had softened her features, but not her spirit. She still insisted on driving the stick shift despite Dominic's concerns, claiming the baby enjoyed the vibration of the V8 engine. "Dad!" she called, awkwardly extracting herself from the low-slung seat. "Are you hiding out here again?" Dominic's parents are 15 minutes away. I wiped my hands on a shop rag. "Just finishing Emma's chair. Can't have my granddaughter sleeping in one of those mass-produced cribs, can we?" Rebecca entered the garage, her eyes widening at the sight of the completed rocker. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, running her hand along the smooth finish. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect." "Needs another coat of sealant," I said, always the perfectionist. "But it'll be ready by the time she is." Rebecca lowered herself carefully onto a nearby stool, resting her hands on her rounded belly. "I've been thinking about that day a lot recently," she said quietly. "The newspaper, the confrontation, all of it. I didn't need to ask which day. 5 years had passed, but the memory remained vivid for both of us. The day I'd placed a full-page ad in the Mapleton Gazette, responding to a fraudulent wedding invoice. Becoming a parent makes you reflect, I guess," she continued. "I keep wondering how I'll handle the tough moments with Emma. If I'll have your courage." I smiled, setting down my sanding block. "It's not about courage. It's about love. When you love someone enough, standing up for that relationship becomes as natural as breathing." "Still," she persisted, "you could have just walked away, paid the bill, or ignored it entirely. Most people would have." "I'm not most people," I said, joining her on the adjacent workbench. "And neither are you, Bex. That's what the Whitleys didn't understand at first. We Kellers may not have their pedigree, but we have something more valuable." "Stubbornness?" she suggested with a laugh. "Integrity," I corrected. "The willingness to face uncomfortable truths, rather than hide behind comfortable lies." Rebecca grew quiet, absently tracing the wood grain patterns on the rocker with her fingertip. "You know what's strange? That whole mess brought us closer to Dominic's parents than we might have been otherwise." She wasn't wrong. The aftermath of that public confrontation had forced all of us to dismantle our assumptions about each other. The stiff formality that might have defined our relationship had been replaced by something more genuine, not always comfortable, but authentic. "Speaking of which," Rebecca said, checking her watch, "we should head inside. They're bringing over some family heirloom for the nursery." As we walked from the garage to the house, Rebecca leaning slightly on my arm for balance, I marveled at how different things had turned out from what I'd feared 5 years ago. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, I said finally, but it does mean choosing to build something new from the broken pieces. She nodded, her usual composure briefly cracking to reveal genuine emotion. Emma is very lucky to have you as her grandfather. I hope. She hesitated. I hope you'll help me be the kind of grandmother who values substance over appearance. Before I could respond, exclamations from inside the garage drew our attention. Rebecca was showing everyone the completed rocking chair, Dominic running his hand admiringly over the smooth curves, Edward examining the joinery with newfound appreciation. Did you really make this without any power tools? Edward was asking, inspecting the hand-cut dovetail joints. Some things are worth the extra time, I replied, joining them. Mass production has its place, but there's something special about creating something specifically for someone you love. Edward nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about taking one of those woodworking classes at the community college. The ones funded by that donation we made years ago. He added with a self-deprecating smile, acknowledging the irony that his damage control donation had evolved into a genuine interest. They're excellent, I confirmed. I teach the advanced joinery class on Thursdays. Perhaps I'll start with beginner's whittling, he laughed. Wouldn't want to embarrass myself in front of the master. As we admired the chair together, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had intertwined since that fateful wedding invoice. The Whitleys had initially seen me as an embarrassment to be managed, a blue-collar intrusion into their curated world. Now Edward was considering taking my woodworking class, and Elaine was asking for guidance on authentic grandparenting. Back in the house, Rebecca orchestrated a meal that bridged our different worlds. Dominic's gourmet flatbreads alongside my homemade chili, Edward's expensive wine paired with local craft beer. As we gathered around the table, not segregated by social status, but united by shared anticipation of Emma's arrival, I marveled at how a moment of crisis had ultimately created something beautiful. A toast, Dominic suggested, raising his glass. To family, not the one we're born into or marry into, but the one we actively choose to build every day. To family, we echoed, glasses clinking in the warm evening light. Later, after the Whitleys had departed with promises to return for Sunday dinner, Rebecca found me on the back porch, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. You're quiet, she observed, easing herself into the swing beside me. Just thinking, I replied, automatically adjusting to accommodate her pregnant form, about how differently things might have turned out. If you hadn't placed that ad, you mean? I nodded. We might have had a picture-perfect wedding with a hollow core. You might have continued trying to fit yourself into a world that wasn't designed for you. The Whitleys and I might have maintained a polite distance forever. Instead, we got a beautiful mess, Rebecca said, resting her head on my shoulder. A genuine relationship built on truth rather than appearances. Worth $40,000, wouldn't you say? I teased. She laughed. Best money we never spent. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the porch swing creaking gently beneath us, fireflies dotting the yard like earthbound stars. Dad, Rebecca said eventually, her voice taking on a more serious tone, I need to ask you something important. Anything, Bex. When Emma's born, will you tell her the moon story? The one about how it follows her because she's its favorite person? I smiled, remembering the line from my newspaper ad that had resonated so deeply. Of course. And will you teach her to use tools? To build things with her hands? To value work that leaves calluses? As long as her parents approve, I promised. We more than approve, she said firmly. Dominic and I have been talking. We want Emma to understand both sides of her heritage. The privilege she'll inherit from the Whitleys, yes, but also the strength and self-reliance she'll learn from you. She took my weathered hand in hers, examining the permanent stains of wood finish, the small scars from decades of manual work. These hands raised me, supported me, built a life for us. I want Emma to know that kind of love. Practical, tangible, unshakable. Emotion welled in my throat. She will, I managed. Between all of us, she'll know every kind of love there is. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text. Dominic's headed to the store for my late-night ice cream craving, she reported with a grin. Quote, even the Whitley fortune can't get him out of midnight grocery runs. I laughed, picturing the polished executive navigating the fluorescent aisles of the 24-hour supermarket in search of whatever improbable flavor combination Rebecca was craving now. "You know what amazes me most?" Rebecca mused. "How something so potentially destructive, that fake invoice, my almost wedding to a version of myself that didn't really exist, ended up creating something so much stronger than what we had before." "That's the thing about craftsmanship," I said, thinking of countless projects that had seemed ruined until I found a way to incorporate the flaw into something beautiful. Sometimes the most interesting pieces come from working with the knots and imperfections rather than discarding them. "Is that your subtle way of calling our family naughty and imperfect?" she teased. "The best families are," I replied. "Perfect families don't exist except in photographs and social media posts. Real families argue and reconcile, hurt each other and heal together, make terrible mistakes and find forgiveness." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, rubbing her belly absently. "I hope I can be that kind of parent," she said finally. "The kind who loves unconditionally but doesn't shy away from hard truths." "You already are," I assured her. "The moment you stood up to Elaine, choosing authenticity over approval, that was the first real parenting decision you made for Emma, even before she was conceived." She looked surprised. "I never thought of it that way." "Every choice you make about how to live with integrity shapes the world your child will inherit," I explained. "That's something I learned raising you. It's not just what we say that teaches our children. It's how we live, the values we demonstrate when faced with difficult choices." The evening deepened around us, crickets joining the chorus of night sounds. In the distance, a car approached, Dominic returning with his precious cargo of ice cream, completing our unconventional family circle. "When I placed that ad," I said softly, "I thought I was losing you. I never imagined it would be the beginning of something so much richer than what we had before." "That's because you were willing to risk everything for truth," Rebecca replied. "Most people aren't that brave. They accept half relationships, surface connections, beautiful lies, because confronting reality is too frightening." "It wasn't bravery," I insisted. "It was necessity. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible." "That's exactly what bravery is, Dad," she said, squeezing my hand. "And that's exactly what I want Emma to learn from you." As Dominic's headlights swept up the driveway, Rebecca struggled to her feet, laughing as I steadied her. "Your granddaughter is doing somersaults tonight. Feel." She placed my hand on her belly, and sure enough, I felt the strong kick of new life. A tiny foot or elbow pushing against my palm as if saying, "Hello, I'm here, I'm coming soon." "Strong," I observed, my voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." "And her grandfather," Rebecca added, kissing my cheek before walking toward Dominic, who was juggling grocery bags and his keys. I remained on the porch, watching my daughter and her husband enter the warm light of their home. Our home, really. This place where past grievances had been transformed into deeper understanding, where different worlds had learned to coexist with respect rather than resentment. 5 years ago, I'd been driven by anger and hurt to make a public statement, never imagining that my act of defiance would ultimately create something beautiful. Not just a reconciliation, but a genuine blending of families, a bridge across differences that had once seemed insurmountable. In just a few weeks, Emma would arrive, the physical embodiment of that bridge, carrying the Whitley name and fortune alongside the Keller resilience and craftsmanship. She would inherit not the tension that had preceded her parents' wedding, but the hard-won wisdom that had emerged from that conflict, the understanding that authenticity, however messy, is always preferable to perfection built on falsehood. As the night settled fully around me, I made a silent promise to my unborn granddaughter. I would teach her that the strongest bonds aren't forged in ease and agreement, but in the courage to face difficult truths together. That family isn't defined by bloodlines or bank accounts, but by the willingness to show up for each other, especially when it's hardest. That love, real love, isn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances, but about the quiet dignity of everyday faithfulness. And yes, I would tell her about the moon that follows her car at night, because she's its favorite person in the whole world. Some stories are too important not to pass down, especially those that remind us we are worthy of being followed, cherished, and loved. Not for what we accomplish or how we appear, but simply for who we are. Rising from the porch swing, I took one last look at the star-filled sky before heading inside to join my family. The one I'd fought for, the one I'd almost lost, the one that had been strengthened rather than broken by our willingness to face the truth together. Some lessons cost $40,000. Others are priceless. The difference, I had learned, lies not in the price tag, but in the courage to recognize what truly matters, and the wisdom to fight for it, even when the whole world tells you to stay silent. The day Emma Whitley Keller turned 18 was unseasonably warm for October in Mapleton. The maple trees lining our street had exploded into brilliant reds and golds, but the temperature hovered near 70 degrees, perfect for the outdoor graduation party we'd planned. Yes, graduation. My granddaughter had completed high school a semester early and was preparing for a gap year that had both sides of her family simultaneously proud and anxious. I stood on the back deck of what was now our shared family compound, watching the caterers set up under Rebecca and Dominic's direction. Over the years, we'd gradually connected our properties, first with a simple garden path between my house and theirs, then with a shared workshop where I'd taught both Dominic and Edward the fundamentals of woodworking, and finally, with the glass-enclosed sunroom that bridged the two homes completely. "Grandpa Rob!" Emma's voice rang out as she bounded up the deck stairs, her graduation cap askew on her dark hair. "Mom said you're hiding from the photographers." I smiled, straightening her cap. "Not hiding. Observing. There's a difference." "Mm-hmm." She didn't sound convinced. "Grandma Elaine is looking for you. Something about wanting a 4-generation photo before the ceremony." 4 generations. Elaine and Edward, Rebecca and Dominic, Emma, and now little Lucas, Emma's half-brother who had arrived somewhat unexpectedly when Rebecca was 42. At 4 years old, he was the undisputed prince of the family, doted on by grandparents from both sides. "I'll find her," I promised. "How are you feeling? Ready for the big speech?" Emma had been selected as her class valedictorian, though she'd chosen to receive her diploma privately rather than wait for the official ceremony in June. Still, she'd been asked to say a few words at today's gathering. "Nervous," she admitted. "I've been rewriting it all morning. It needs to be perfect." I raised an eyebrow. Perfect is overrated. Honest is better. "That's what I'm afraid of." She leaned against the railing, suddenly serious. "I want to talk about the newspaper story. About what happened before Mom and Dad got married." My heart skipped a beat. The infamous newspaper ad had become family lore over the years. The framed copies still hung in the sunroom connecting our houses, but it remained a complex topic, especially with outsiders present. "Are you sure? There will be a lot of people here who don't know that story." Emma nodded firmly. "That's exactly why I want to tell it. Everyone sees our family now, how close we all are, how Whitley Industries partners with your community workshop program, how Grandma Elaine and Mom are practically best friends. But nobody knows how close it all came to never happening." I studied her face, the determined set of her jaw so reminiscent of Rebecca, the thoughtful eyes that reminded me of Dominic at his best. "What's the real reason, Em?" She sighed, twisting the class ring on her finger. "All my friends with divorced parents or blended families, they're all so bitter. Their grandparents barely speak to each other. Half of them have holiday schedules that require spreadsheets to track who goes where. And I want them to know it doesn't have to be that way. That sometimes the worst moments can become foundations for something better, if people are willing to be honest and do the hard work." Pride swelled in my chest. This remarkable young woman, with her Whitley connections and Keller practicality, had somehow absorbed the most important lesson from our family's turbulent history. "Tell your story," I said, squeezing her shoulder. "The real one, not the polished version." She hugged me impulsively. "Thanks, Grandpa. I'd better go find Mom and make sure she's prepared for what I'm going to say." As Emma bounded off, I made my way through the growing crowd toward the large tent where Elaine was directing the photography setup with her characteristic precision. Over the years, her perfectionism had mellowed into a more balanced appreciation for both structure and spontaneity, thanks in large part to Lucas, whose arrival had given her a second chance at grandparenting with less pressure and more joy. "Robert, there you are," Elaine waved me over. "We need you for the legacy portrait. The lighting is perfect right now." I joined the assembled family group. Edward in his wheelchair. A stroke 3 years ago had limited his mobility but not his spirit. Elaine beside him, Rebecca and Dominic with Lucas squirming between them, and Emma sliding in just as the photographer raised his camera. "Wait," Emma said suddenly. "We're missing something." She darted away, returning moments later with the framed newspaper ad, which she placed prominently on her lap as we all repositioned. Are you sure? Elaine asked, her expression betraying a hint of the old discomfort. Absolutely, Emma replied. This is part of our story. The most important part, maybe. The photographer looked confused, but proceeded to capture several shots of our unconventional family tableau, complete with the evidence of our most public disagreement prominently displayed. After the photos, I found myself cornered by several of Emma's friends, parents, all eager to discuss the vocational education program I'd developed at the community college with funding from Whitley Industries. What had begun as Edward's damage control donation had evolved into a thriving partnership, combining my practical knowledge with the Whitleys' business acumen and resources. The waiting list is 6 months long now, I explained to a father interested in enrolling his son, but we're expanding again next year. Dominic just approved the budget for a new building. It's remarkable, the man said. My brother went through your program last year. He'd been unemployed for 2 years after the factory closed. Now he's making more than he ever did before, with his own custom furniture business. That's exactly why we started it, Edward said, having wheeled himself over to join our conversation. Robert showed me that craftsmanship isn't just about creating beautiful objects. It's about creating meaningful lives. I smiled at my once adversary, now business partner and friend. Edward's being modest. His connections turned a small training program into a county-wide economic revitalization project. We make a good team, Edward said simply. Different strengths. Common purpose. As the graduation ceremony began, I took my seat in the front row beside Elaine, who patted my hand affectionately. I still can't believe she's 18, she whispered. Where did the time go? Into good places, I replied, watching as Emma took her position at the podium, her poise a testament to both nature and nurture, the Whitley confidence tempered by Keller groundedness. Thank you all for coming today, Emma began, her voice steady. Most graduation speeches talk about looking forward, about the future waiting to be written. But today I want to talk about looking backward, about how the past shapes who we become, even when that past is complicated. She unfolded a piece of paper that I recognized as a photocopy of my original newspaper ad. 18 years ago, before I was born, my grandfather placed this full-page advertisement in the local paper. It was in response to something my other grandparents had done, something manipulative and hurtful involving my parents' wedding. A murmur ran through the audience. I glanced at Elaine, who sat straight-backed but serene, her hand still resting on mine. Most families would have fractured permanently after such a public confrontation, Emma continued. The Whitleys and the Kellers might have maintained a cold civility at best, with my parents caught painfully in the middle. She paused, scanning the audience. But that's not what happened. Instead, these two very different families chose something radical: honesty, accountability, forgiveness without forgetting. The hard, daily work of building genuine understanding across differences that once seemed insurmountable. I felt a lump forming in my throat as Emma described the aftermath of that tumultuous time, not glossing over the difficulties, but highlighting the transformation that had occurred as both families stepped beyond their comfort zones toward each other. My earliest memories are of Grandpa Rob teaching me to use tools in his workshop while Grandma Elaine read me poetry. Of Sunday dinners where we celebrated both the Whitleys, business successes, and the Kellers, community contributions. Of a family that contained multitudes, different perspectives, different values, different approaches to life, all equally respected and valued. Rebecca was openly crying now, Dominic's arm around her shoulders. Little Lucas looked confused, but patted his mother's hand comfortingly. When I tell my friends about my family, they often say we're lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it, Emma continued. What we have was built deliberately, brick by painful brick, through countless difficult conversations and compromises, through the courage to speak truth, even when silence would have been easier, through the humility to admit when we're wrong, and the grace to forgive when we've been wronged. She held up the newspaper clipping. This could have been the end of a relationship. Instead, it became the foundation of something stronger. That's the lesson I'm taking with me as I leave high school early to spend a year working in both my families' worlds, interning at Whitley Industries and teaching at Grandpa's community workshop program. This was news to me. Emma had mentioned the gap year, but not its specific purpose. I felt a surge of pride that she wanted to honor both sides of her heritage so explicitly. I've learned that the most beautiful things often emerge from our most painful moments, if we have the courage to face them honestly. That family isn't defined by bloodlines or bank accounts, but by the willingness to show up for each other, especially when it's hardest. That love, real love, isn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances, but about the quiet dignity of everyday faithfulness. Emma's eyes found mine, and she smiled. My grandpa Rob taught me that the moon follows me at night because I'm its favorite person in the whole world. My grandma Elaine taught me that true elegance comes from authenticity, not appearance. Both lessons were true. Both were essential. As she concluded her speech to thunderous applause, I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. The journey from that angry, hurt father placing a newspaper ad to this moment, surrounded by a family that bridged worlds I once thought incompatible, felt almost miraculous. Elaine leaned over, her voice thick with emotion. "We came so close to missing all of this," she whispered. "If you hadn't placed that ad, if we hadn't been forced to confront ourselves." "But we did," I replied simply. "And here we are." The formal ceremony concluded, giving way to the reception. As twilight approached, fairy lights twinkled in the trees connecting our properties. Guests mingled freely across the lawns. Whitley business associates, chatting with my old colleagues from the manufacturing plant. Emma's friends moving seamlessly between the elegant cocktail station Elaine had arranged and the more casual barbecue area I'd insisted upon. Later, as the party wound down, I found myself alone with Rebecca on the deck where the day had begun. Lucas had fallen asleep in Edward's lap, a touching tableau that Dominic was quietly photographing. Emma was surrounded by friends, her graduation cap now adorned with signatures and well wishes. "Did you ever imagine this?" Rebecca asked softly, gesturing to the scene before us. "That day when you opened that email with the wedding invoice, did you ever dream we'd end up here?" I shook my head. Never. I thought I was burning a bridge that day. Turns out I was laying a foundation instead. She leaned her head against my shoulder, just as she had countless times throughout her life. "You taught me the most important lesson, Dad, that sometimes you have to risk everything for the truth." "And you taught me one too," I replied, "that it's never too late to rebuild what seems broken beyond repair." We stood in comfortable silence, watching as Emma broke away from her friends to join her grandparents, perching on the arm of Edward's wheelchair and gently stroking Lucas's hair. The 4 generations of our blended family, together in a harmony that had been hard-won but was all the more precious for the struggle. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the family had retired to their respective houses, I walked alone in the garden connecting our homes. The moon hung full and bright above, casting silver light across the path that physically and symbolically linked the Keller and Whitley worlds. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from that moment of bitter betrayal to this rich tapestry of genuine connection. About how close we had come to losing it all. About how sometimes the greatest gifts emerge from our deepest wounds if we have the courage to face them honestly. The newspaper ad that had once been an act of defiance had transformed into something else entirely, a family origin story, a testament to the power of truth over pretense, of authentic connection over superficial harmony. What had begun as $40,000 worth of anger had yielded rewards beyond any price tag. Emma's words from her speech echoed in my mind. Family isn't defined by bloodlines or bank accounts, but by the willingness to show up for each other, especially when it's hardest. She had understood, perhaps better than any of us, the true legacy of that tumultuous time, not the conflict itself, but the commitment to honesty and growth that had emerged from it. The willingness to face uncomfortable truths together rather than maintain comfortable lies apart. As I turned to head back inside, I noticed a light still on in Emma's room. Through the window I could see her sitting at her desk, writing intently in what appeared to be a journal. Recording this day, perhaps, or planning her next adventure, or simply reflecting on the complex, imperfect, beautiful family that surrounded her. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun with a fraudulent invoice and a furious response had come full circle, creating not just reconciliation but genuine transformation for all of us. We had each been changed by our willingness to step beyond old boundaries, to risk vulnerability, to choose truth over appearance. Some lessons cost $40,000. Others are priceless. I knew which ones would endure. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.